Hi there, my name is Karen Bellnier, and thank you for joining me for a few minutes to talk about my thinking around decoding the faculty journey to skillful online teaching. First, I'd like to let you think about where you are. Are you somebody who is teaching online, or someone who supports faculty who teach online, or do you manage the people who support the faculty who teach online? Or are you thinking about any of those topics? If so, I want to have a conversation with you. Let's start by putting the elephant in the room to the side for a few minutes. We'll come back to it later. The pandemic response has thrown many of our processes, conversations, and assumptions about online teaching right up in the air. For the next few minutes, allow me to lay out a question from our pre-pandemic experience, and then we'll circle back at the end to what it might mean now. I have been thinking for the last few months about a challenge that I've encountered many times, and I suspect many of you have too. I want to share an idea on how to tackle it. It's my sense we might be doing a little bit of this backwards. So many of us work with faculty who come from a wide variety of motivations, expectations, and experience. And each person's journey for online teaching may take its own path. One of these individuals might be a new faculty member looking to find their place in the department. Another might be looking to add to their promotion portfolio, and yet another might be looking at his or her retirement and looking for a way to be more flexible in their teaching load. There can be people who are highly engaged in their teaching practice and looking to expand it into an online environment, and people who just think it's the next thing and would like to learn a little bit more. Regardless of that background, a lot of faculty who take the journey to online learning, their journey includes a number of typical stops. There's information on pedagogy, often including course design and the rising interest in community of inquiry. There's becoming comfortable with the technology that mediates the process. And then there's taking both of those two areas and integrating it with the disciplinary specific information and skills that they need to provide. We know there is a lot to know about teaching online, and decades of online teaching and thinking have given us guidelines and standards and best practices and research. It's a ton of information. And I think a lot of us also know that we want the faculty teaching online to know about it because it helps boost their confidence, it helps meet our learning goals, and ultimately it helps serve our students. I'd like to give you a couple of moments to reflect on your own experience, whether teaching online or supporting people who do, and think about where you've seen common struggles in this journey. It might be a conceptual challenge, an attitudinal block, a procedural struggle, or a disconnect in a way of thinking. Go ahead and pause for a minute. I'll wait. In my experience working with faculty for over 13 years, here's a few of the challenges that I've commonly encountered. Sometimes it's a question of self-identity. Sometimes the approaches and strategies that are often talked about in online teaching conflict with someone's concept of what being a teacher is or what she feels like she does best. Perhaps she feels she isn't sure where she fits in an online course, or that he loves connecting with students and has a hard time imagining how that happens in a digital environment. Then there's the area of engagement. Research tells us about the critical nature of promoting meaningful student engagement. However, sometimes it is left to the last phase in the course planning process and ends up perhaps not being as well integrated into the learning experience, and then students might perceive it as busy work. A third challenge that I see a lot is around the need for an execution of clarity. That skill of looking at one's courses and policies and instructions from that novice learner perspective and to anticipate the questions and address them proactively. That might be a new skill or a new way of thinking and difficult to wrap one's head around. Did any of these three areas match your thoughts? I imagine if we all sat down for a conversation, we could come up with quite a list. If so, what do we do about this? This is different than a list of information, right? These are some pretty fundamental challenges. And so what I'm suggesting today is that a more of the same approach is not the answer. I imagine a lot of you have either seen, created, led, or experienced one of these common models. There's the kitchen sink course, where we're so glad that faculty have given us their time and attention that we just want to tell them everything. Others are the standalone, self-directed resources and references site. The other is the one-on-one consultations, conversations that faculty and support staff have around what needs to happen in their course. All of these can be really effective. A lot of them have been thoughtfully planned out and have been invaluable in supporting faculty on their journey. A lot of them may even have been backwards designed to a set of objectives and competencies around pedagogy and technology. However, I feel like we're still missing something. So I want to share with you another theoretical framework that in the past has been applied to courses and learning in courses, and I think could be an instrumental key in adjusting the way we think about faculty learning. It's called Decoding the Disciplines, and it was originally introduced by Joan Mittendorf and David Pace in 2004. And more recently, in a book by Joan Mittendorf and Lee Shopkow, they've really described the process in much more detail in Overcoming Student Learning Bottlenecks. So what is this system? Well, the literature in decoding describes the potholes we were just talking about, the challenges, as bottlenecks to learning. And specifically, they're defining them as conceptual, procedural, and attitudinal places where learners get stuck on their learning journey, and where skilled practitioners, using disciplinary specific ways of thinking, can navigate successfully. And so identifying those places, and importantly, what they call the mental moves, the steps that those skilled practitioners take, is a key to rethinking our learning design approach. One of the challenges is that often the skilled practitioners have incorporated this way of thinking so deeply that it can be difficult to articulate. Kind of an example of expert blindness. And often requires a dialogue with another person, typically a novice to their discipline, to really extract those details. Once you have those bottlenecks identified and uncovered the ways of thinking and the approaches that are successful, there's then an additional process that I think will look familiar to many of you who are in instructional design, faculty development, or faculty who have thought about these kinds of things, in that you then create a system that models those successful ways of doing things, provides opportunity to practice and give feedback, identify areas for motivation and reduce resistance to the ideas, assessing their mastery, and then what I like about this particular model is that it also includes a step to share the results of that work with the larger community of practice. Because this can be a fairly intensive process, and I think any one of us trying to do it on our own would ultimately lead to frustration and disappointment. I think this is really, if this works, if this applies in the environment I'm suggesting, a community effort is really the way this is going to be successful. So while those steps 3 through 6 might look really familiar to some of you, the key difference is really the starting point and the origin of the process that sets the entire path for the learning design journey. What it requires is a shift, right? The shift then becomes focusing the learning design, the planning, around creating success around those bottlenecks, using those steps. That being able to articulate one's ends objectives are still important, but the path constructed to get there does so with a different focus. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. And I do think there are opportunities for interaction between our existing course design processes and this concept, but there really is kind of a different lens of focus that you get when you start thinking about these bottleneck concepts. And while this is relatively new to me, I have been in this thinking space for I don't know, maybe a year, something about it really compels me. I feel pretty strongly that it has a lot of potential for creating learning for faculty that focuses on the areas where, as learners, the support and scaffolding is most needed. That it could allow for faculty with that array of backgrounds that we talked about earlier to get the specific areas of support where it's needed, and then to have independence where there's existing expertise or self-directed resources then can be really useful. I think it could allow instructional designers and faculty developers to focus their limited time and resources on these areas where their help is most needed and where it's most impactful. I think as learners and as supporters of learners, we all have high needs and limited time. And I'm suggesting that this path of discovery, this decoding the disciplines model, might really be a way to be effective with the time that we do have. So let me circle back to the elephant in the room. And how does COVID teaching change this whole equation? And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I think we do know, and we certainly have seen over the last several months, that when there is teaching online without online teaching specific knowledge and skills, that we see student engagement, motivation, and retention drop, and we see faculty frustration, self-doubt, and burnout rise. And I suspect that we either know somebody, we are somebody, or we have read about somebody where this has certainly been the case. It has been a really difficult set of months, I guess a year now. And I think, like many other places, what COVID and the pandemic response has done is really amplify and accelerate many of the forces that already existed. Many of us have struggled to take an exponentially larger number of faculty through existing support and training processes. And I'm wondering whether this approach could transform the way we think about that work. And I think importantly, it could really allow our faculty learners to be an equal partner in that process, and allowing it to be an adaptable and inclusive journey that incorporates the knowledge and their knowledge and experience into their path. So what are the next steps, right? This right now is a thought puzzle. I think the next steps are that some of these decoding interviews, this discovery of bottlenecks, needs to happen with our skilled practitioners and our experts in online learning, in our faculty developers and our instructional designers and the like. And then using those bottleneck insights and those expert moves, see what kind of new approaches to educational development and support emerge from that. And then, of course, that last stage of sharing those results with our communities of practice. So what do you think? I've laid out a concept, an approach, and in my echo chamber, it sounds like something really interesting, but I'd love to hear from you. Please engage with me on Pronto during our conference. Please, after the conference, feel free to reach out to me by email or on Twitter, although I will confess to being an inconsistent Twitter user. And I want to know the answers to some of these questions. Do you think this approach, this model, this framework could be of value to you in your work? Does this concept of finding these maybe more abstract, these attitudinal, conceptual ways of thinking bottlenecks, does that resonate? Are you also feeling that same kind of challenge and frustration at not being able to connect all the dots for people? Would knowing what these bottlenecks are, or at least a subset of them are, be useful to you in your work as an online instructor, as a supporter of online instructors, or as someone who is involved with planning and strategically supporting these efforts? And would having maybe a framework or a toolkit that might guide either your departments or even individual learners to reflect and uncover their own bottlenecks be a useful addition to your strategies? So that's what I'm thinking, and I really want to know what you're thinking. So thank you for spending your 15 minutes with me, and I hope this is really the beginning of a conversation, not the end of a session. Thank you.